The 29 Club. It's part of the rich history of the Melbourne Cricket Club. The 29 Club is celebrating 50 years. Come with me and meet some of the personalities and hear some of the stories that make the 29 Club the unique entity that it is.
Nearly time we were leaving. We'll have one more for the road. It don't mean nothing. It don't mean nothing. So we gather around the table, raise our champagne. Don't mean nothing. Don't mean nothing. 'Cause we've got this night together. We'll have it now forever. Don't tell me now you can write me a letter. Where will it be in 50 years? 50 years.
The 29 Club was formed at a time about 1956 when Melbourne was a rather different place, Tony.
To me, it's the epitome of fellowship.
It was because these fellows were getting to the age of 32 to 34 or 5. They all felt pretty young in spirit, but they were being told it's time you got out. And they decided that they didn't want to turn 30. So we decided to use the term 29 Club.
Camaraderie, friendship, great social cricket, a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, and I suppose above all, touring.
The 29 Club really is an outlet for social cricket.
Lindsay gave a great speech at that first dinner, and we all remember his singing of and down came a bloody great blackbird, and down came a bloody great blackbird, and down came a bloody great blackbird, and clip off her nose. We all remember that.
As we always said, what happened on tour stays on tours.
One of our 29 Club committee at the moment fell asleep in an unusual position one night, and when we went the next morning to do our morning ablutions, he was still there sitting on the throne.
Oh, a batsman pulling away. And I said, what's up? He said, I can't concentrate. I said, what's up? He said, there's 2 people copulating up there on the 4th floor. So with that, I turned around, and sure enough, the cover fieldsman and everybody, we all had a look, and there was a couple of naked bodies there. They must have woken up because the girl come completely naked, waved to us and pulled down the blind. We thought that was a plus for the afternoon.
Look, to just play with John McCarthy and have Jeff Eggleston and these sorts of Doc McDonald, Clive Fairbairn, who got this institution up and going, we owe them an enormous debt.
To me, it was the friendships, the fellowship, and the ability to mix with cricketers of all ages, but all abilities across a great range. I think that's what the 29 Club has provided all these years.
There is a tavern at the ground, where 29ers sit around mid pints of beer and camaraderie, and talk about the MCC Happy hours of reminiscing, not a single stroke is missing, as the runs and wickets tumble from their memory. Good friends, the game will live for aye, as long as 29ers play, Niners play. So lift your glass and drink with throttle free to cricket and the MCC.
I think, Tony, it means to me, in the last few words of Doug Reed's song, which we sing every time at the end of the annual dinner. Good friends, the game will live for aye, so long as 29ers play, Niners play. So lift your glass and drink with throttles free to cricket and the MCC. That's what I think. It will live for aye. The 29 Club was formed at a time about 1956 when Melbourne was a rather different place, Tony. It was quieter, the roads weren't so cluttered. Things were at a slower pace. And there have been a number of players who'd come back from the war and from various aspects of the wartime matters, who had been playing now for about 10 years. They were getting older, they were getting to 30, 32, 34, and their families were wondering about getting away for weekends and so on. And I think that we needed to think of something else for them to do. I'd recently come back from being away in England for a couple of years, and I'd been very fortunate to play club cricket over there for Oxford City and South Oxford Amateurs. And I'd seen how well cricket went over there and how they had such wonderful end-of-season dinners. And I felt that we should have something like that ourselves. So I put the question to Keith Tolhurst, who was Vice President of the club and who was Chairman of the cricket section. I said to Keith, it would be nice to have an organisation which expanded cricket into the country to other organisations and so on, and which at the end of the year might have an excellent end-of-season dinner. And we had a lot of players who thought it was a great idea. Keith Tolhurst took it to committee, and in consecutive months they agreed to the idea in principle. Keith Rigg, Clive Fairbairn, Jack Daniel and Jack Green, Max Haysom and I had a meeting at my house, and we invited interested players to an initial meeting at the Albert Cricket Ground when the first 34 members of the 29 Club drew up, at least organised a committee and drew up the rules. It was because these fellows were getting to the age of 32 to 34 or 5. They all felt pretty young in spirit, but they were being told it's time you got out. And they decided that they didn't want to turn 30. So we decided to use the term 29 Club. Of course, there had been a club in existence in England called the 40 Club, and I think that gave us the idea. We will never forget that first dinner at Fontainebleau. It wasn't here at the ground because we didn't have a major dining room at the ground at that time. We had 2 dinners at Fontainebleau, and it wasn't until the tavern was constructed here that we had our 3rd dinner here, where we've continued ever since. But Lindsay gave a great speech at that first dinner, and we all remember his singing of "And down came a bloody great blackbird, and down came a bloody great blackbird, and down came a bloody great blackbird, and clip off her nose." We all remember that.
Well, I can recall how we used to go to play against the Western Plains Association at a town, Derrenallum, near Hamilton. We'd set off at after playing cricket on Saturday afternoon, have a few beers afterwards, and then set off and travel to Derranallum. About a 4-hour journey, so we'd arrive, say, at 11 o'clock. We were billeted, so our host looked after us and got us safely into bed. And the following day, we'd start the game at about 10:30 and have our game of cricket. And they were a good team, and we had some good cricketers. Usually Colin McCutcheon, in my 2 trips, was the captain manager. The custom was for the home side to bat first, and they would bat, say, till 12:30, and then we'd pause for lunch. And that was their secret weapon, because lunch was a most wonderful, sumptuous affair. And the tables were groaning with great food, predominated by fresh lobster, crayfish, beg your pardon. And naturally, we were all fairly young, you know, under 40. Some of them only 20. And we hopped into this with great gusto and a few beers along the way. Then the crunch came, because we had to go out and field for about an hour. And I don't think I've ever been through anything that was quite as agonising as that. And at the end of the hour, their innings would be brought to a close, and out we went to bat. Fortunately, I batted at number 10, and I had time to recover if ever I was to get a hand. Then after the game, there'd be a little bit more socialising, and we'd set off about 7 o'clock or so to head back to Melbourne, and arrive back, say, 11 o'clock or so, and eventually get home, and lucky to get into bed before midnight, and then have to front up for work the following morning. God, they were hard days. Wonderful.
Oh, gosh, I don't know how far we can go here, but Deniliquin was always an eventful trip, and one of our 29 Club committeemen at the moment fell asleep in an unusual position one night, and when we went the next morning to do our morning ablutions, he was still there sitting on the throne.
Oh, a batsman pulling away. And I said, what's up? He said, I can't concentrate. I said, what's up? He said, there's 2 people copulating up there on the 4th floor. So with that, I turned around, and sure enough, the cover fieldsman and everybody, we all had a look, and there was a couple of naked bodies there. They must have woken up because the girl comes completely naked, waved to us and pulled down the blind. We thought that was a plus for the afternoon.
Whenever we made country trips, we would always get probably up there on a Saturday night, and we'd be met by the opposition, and we always found that they had 2 teams. They had a team to receive us on Saturday night, and when we got to the ground next day, they were a totally different crowd altogether. 9 times out of 10, we had fairly hefty sort of hangovers, and it was then part of our captain's responsibility to decide whether we wanted to get runs quickly or whether we wanted to get them out quickly, because we knew we weren't going to see the day out. Anyway, we played Western Plains at Derranallum, and this is going back quite a while now, but the wicket-keeper was a chap by the name of Warwick Harrison, and they were famous for their lunches. And we'd batted in the morning, fortunately, and by the time lunchtime was over and all the refreshments had been had, and beautiful lunch and all the rest of it, we ambled out onto the 29ers ambled out onto the field. Warwick Harrison was keeping and took up his position, crouched on the ground, knowing full well that I think it was Cyril Smith going to be the bowler. Cyril was a long time placing his field, and of course, by this time, Warwick Harrison's gone down, waiting, lots of lunch and all the rest of it, and sure enough, Cyril came in to bowl the first ball. Warwick Harrison didn't move. The ball went shoulder high, straight over his head, 4 runs before the game had even started.
It was my first year of presidency of the club. It was 1960. We were at our annual dinner here at the ground. I had the VIPs in the general committee room having drinks beforehand, and the plebs were outside somewhere having their drinks. And Doc Everett was going to be our speaker. He was leader of the opposition. We were in the committee room. We were due to go in to eat in 20 minutes' time. I had a message from Sydney. The doc can't come, he's in hospital. Oh my God, I thought. I'm not up to this. Arthur Caldwell was there. Arthur Caldwell was Doc Everett's 2IC at the time. Arthur heard me and he said, he put his arm round me and he said, Dr. Ian, he said, don't worry, I'll speak. And Arthur Caldwell spoke that night, and his was the greatest speech I think we have ever had. Everybody loved Arthur from then on.
And there are a couple of wonderful stories that I recollect in Leo's life. The most famous probably is that on the occasion he played cricket for the 29ers against the Navy down at Cerberus. And as they went into the wardroom after the game and had a few, and Leo wisely decided to leave his car there. And he'd come back a day or two and pick it up. So he went down there in a day's time to pick up the car, and the commander asked him if he'd have one before he went back, and one became two and two became three, and so Leo left without his car again. So he said, well, I'll come back tomorrow and get it for sure. Now, this is where we might get into the hypocritical side of it, but he either spent one more trip down there without the car or it went home on the third occasion. But it was a great story in the 29ers for a long, long time.
Oh, Tony, to me it's the epitome of fellowship, meeting new people and being able to mix with the blokes that you've known throughout cricket for a long time.
Camaraderie, friendship, great social cricket, a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, and I suppose above all, touring.
Well, the 29 Club really is an outlet for social cricket, for those that may not be able to commit time and energy to playing senior cricket, or those senior cricketers that want to play more cricket. The opportunity to play cricket on a Sunday or midweek. For me, 29 Club cricket has been my golf club.
Well, as it approaches its 50th year, I think it was the club within the MCC that the mateships really evolved from, because you played with chaps not only from our pennant teams and various 11s within those, but from other clubs, other district cricket clubs, sub-district clubs, playing out of the club 11, and of all ages and all abilities. And, to play with Don Douglas at Benalla as just a young fellow, or in Ballarat with Cyril Park, Greg's father, and even as a man almost 50, he was so proud that he made 40 on a tricky wicket with Wayne Farr. Gee, what a bloke Farr he was. So that, to me, it was the friendships, the fellowship, and the ability to mix with cricketers of all ages, but all abilities across a great range. I think that's what the 29 Club has provided all these years.
The overseas trips, Tony, we've probably been, run at least 12 to 15. A lot of them probably most to the UK, Southeast Asia. We've played in Canada, in the Masters Games, and we've always, it's enabled us to create great friendships. Those people in turn have known, a lot of the teams have come back out here, and we've been able to reciprocate the hospitality.
I was saying to my staff this evening as I left, all resplendent in this blazer, what a great opener for chatting to people wearing this blazer. So you'd play cricket in a lovely part of England, and England is the place to play social cricket, or indeed any cricket. The conditions by and large are magnificent. And then to go into a hotel, have a few beers, and you're in your blazer, rest assured you can talk to anybody.
we hadn't played, I think it might have only been the first or second time we'd played against the Singapore Cricket Club with which we had reciprocity. And how exciting for us when we got to Singapore, but Dennis Lilly, Rod Marsh and Bruce Laird were up there on a coaching tour, and they asked David Broad to come in and bat against Lilly. Marsh was going to keep, Laird was going to be up the other end, and this was just after David had won his Spurs as a Victorian player, where he top scored in his first Shield match against Dennis Lilly on a green top on the MCG, and it was just fantastic for us, you know, long way away in our ability from first-class cricket to mix with these two fellows, Lilly and Marsh, and you know, great history of Australian cricket there in the bar at the Singapore Cricket Club.
Something special, overseas tour. I've been on several. I've done 3 tours to England. Along the way, played cricket in Holland and Wales and Scotland, Singapore, Hong Kong, China, Malaysia, all just through being a member of the MCC and the 29 Club.
Well, that's an interesting question. Characters. I seem to remember one wonderful game at Lord's back in 1983 when the Melbourne Cricket Club played its first game against the MCC London, as I put it, MCC Melbourne versus MCC London. And a number of wonderful things occurred that day, including Stevie McCook's 100. But there were a variety of people, rather than naming people. I mean, I can think of Michael Sholly, Mark Anderson, Stewie Stockdale, Stevie McCook, Rob Templeton. All these fellas are great characters, all their own particular men in themselves, and good players. And indeed, that's one of the enjoyments of the 29ers and playing cricket with the 29ers, because you do rub shoulders with some very good cricketers. And indeed, the cricket we did play was not hit and giggle social stuff in a park. It really was played at a fairly good level. And that included playing overseas as well as playing in Victoria.
I can remember Sam Crowell was to me, I came in as a young player. There's a fellow who was well beyond his playing years and was very old. I can remember I was fielding at the time, and he gave 3 stumpings. He'd volunteered to umpire as a square leg umpire. It wasn't until after the game that I realised that I was standing at cover and none of them were out. But the fact was that Sam had given up his time. He was involved with the 29 Club, and then someone told me after the game that he was very hard at seeing. And that's difficult if someone's doing that as a square leg umpire. But once again, it was all part of the spirit. It's the spirit of it, and that was a bit of an introduction to the 29 Club for me. But look, to just play with John McCarthy and have Jeff Eggleston and these sorts of Doc McDonald, Clive Fairbairn, who got this institution up and going, we owe them an enormous debt along the way. And Bill Gillard, I've toured with him overseas a few times, QC and Supreme Court judge, but just a man with great personality, great passion for cricket, passion for a good time. And of more modern times, hardly a tour goes by with Michael Sholly, a great family man that he is. Somehow just manages to find a way, whenever he knows a 29 Club tour is on, country, interstate, overseas, it's not to be missed.
There is a tavern at the ground, where 29ers sit around mid pints of beer and camaraderie, and talk about the MCC. Happy hours of reminiscing, not a single stroke is missing, as the runs and wickets tumble from their memory. Good friends, the game will live for aye, as long as 29ers play, Niners play. So lift your glass and drink with throttle free to cricket and the MCC.
I think, Tony, it means to me, in the last few words of Doug Reed's song, which we sing every time at the end of the annual dinner. Good friends, the game will live for aye, so long as 29ers play, Niners play. So lift your glass and drink with throttles free to cricket and the MCC. That's what I think. It will live for aye.